Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Menswear Style Podcast. I am your host, Pete Brooker. How we're doing? Well, today we are going to do something of a memoriam, I guess, on the passing of Giorgio Armani. I am going to speak to Rebecca Ryder Caddy. She is a university expert over in Coventry, specialising in fashion, of course. We're going to have a nice sit-down impromptu chat. We hope you enjoy this. All the show notes will be over at menswearstyle.co.uk, and don't forget to leave us a lovely, honest 5-star review if you get the time. Okay, here is Rebecca Ryder Caddy. All right, it's my great pleasure to introduce Rebecca Ryder Caddy to the show. She is a Coventry Uni fashion expert. How are we doing today, Rebecca?
I'm really well, thank you. The sun's out, so that will do.
Yeah, no, it's good. Good sign. Maybe the last of the summer wine, perhaps. We'll
We'll see.
see. Rebecca, well, perhaps before we get into the subject of Armani, and obviously we're going to touch upon his passing and his legacy, you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's just got really loud in this room. I'm so sorry. Um, okay, so I work currently at Coventry University. I've been here for about 15 years, and I am part of the School of Arts and Creative Industries, which was the School of Art and Design. We've grown. We've got other courses which include performance and production in with us now. And I've been an academic in the fashion team for about 15 years now. Before then, and a little bit alongside, I worked as a designer, mostly in menswear, and that's what I trained in initially.
Right. And this was in Coventry, so you grew up and studied there also?
No, not at all. I grew up in North Staffs in near Stoke and did my degree at Derby, University of Derby, and then worked at Derby actually after I graduated, and then moved over to Coventry later.
Right. Okay. All right. Interesting. So just trying to get the geography of where
Very
you are.
moving.
Yeah, definitely center of the UK there. I'm getting that vibe.
Absolutely.
Well, Rebecca, I mean, the news of Giorgio Armani passing in the last week, it's it's interesting. We were talking just off mic about how it seems like such a seismic shake within the fashion industry. Lots of celebrities coming out and paying tribute, lots of headlines and column inches. But you were just telling me also that some people didn't realize he was still alive, which sounds a little bit harsh to say, but I'm kind of with you on that. Maybe you can just tap into that and drill down
Yeah,
on that.
I'm not sure if it's a bit of Mandela effect or if it is just that the brand has been so prevalent in sort of all ranges of the market, everything from high street upwards to luxury and couture level bespoke and everything in between. And I think because the Armani brands have been so visible, it's almost like he's ageless and I think people have lost that there was a person there sometimes.
Yeah. And I wonder just, I mean, I guess outside of our ecosphere, if you did just see Giorgio walking down the street, how many people would recognize him? Because he never dressed overly ostentatious. You know, he was always just being pretty much the same clothes all the time, just black wear. And I don't feel like his face was, he was never bigger than the brand itself, which is probably a testament to him and his legacy.
Yeah, I think it was navy rather than black. I think that was his thing.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. I think he had he always appeared at the end of catwalk shows. I don't think he shied away from the camera as such, but and he did do plenty of interviews, lots of charitable things that they didn't hide from, and the brands themselves were very good at promoting all of the things happening behind the scenes. But I think you're right. I think him as an individual and as a personality was quite mysterious almost, and that's a word that I've read quite a lot over the last couple of days about him, how people didn't know a huge amount about him beyond his close circle. So he did
Oh,
manage to
interesting.
keep things separate, I think.
Yeah. And he was always really hands-on with the shows, wasn't he? With the collections, the catwalks. You know, you'd often hear stories about how he would just be in the background and then come in if he didn't feel like somebody's hair was quite right, or and he would have a certain dress for a certain model that he knew would work with some models and not for others. So I don't know, is that him just being super controlling, like being a control freak, or just he knows that the brand will work with him being present and being there, and that's got a better chance for success with him being there.
I think it's a bit of both of those things, and I think that's really interesting what you said about him having control over sort of all aspects. They're one of well, the Armani brands, the house that it includes all of the sub-brands of Armani, is a very, very rare entity in that it's the only one that doesn't have international shareholders. It was still owned by him. So after he founded it as a first brand in 1975 and it grew from there, he retained control all the way up until this week, which is pretty phenomenal. So I think what you've just highlighted about him being omnipresent at shows and not wanting to relinquish control, but not necessarily through being a tyrant, more just it's his vision and he's managed to protect that all the way through. So I think it's really interesting that that's so visible.
Yeah, I think that's the word I was groping for, the visionary element of him.
Mm.
And it's interesting. I mean, he must have had so many offers to buy him out as well, or to like come in and have other investors. But for him to stay at the top and stay in control for that long, I wonder if that also just speaks to his passion for it as well. Because at some point, I mean, you hear like the likes of like Tom Ford selling out and like, just selling the brand on and thinking, well, I've done as much as I can with this now, and I'll move on to other ideas and other ventures. And he just always wanted to be involved with fashion. I mean, like even from the early days of him leaving his medical profession, that he was there and he just thought, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go window dress and then I'm going to start my own brand. And so I just feel like it's in some people that if they're really, really, truly passionate about something, they can't let it go, no matter
Yeah,
what the price tag.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think the examples that you've said where we see designers leave their eponymous label and go off and do other things, what he did instead was bring those other things into those brands. So they have their own magazine, they have hotels, they had restaurant collaborations, they had exhibitions, they had a theatre that they collaborated with architects with. So, and obviously all of them, aside from all of those experiential things, there's then also the vast product range. So I think when he wanted to try something new, he did it as part of that umbrella and kept everything within the portfolio.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, it's so what made Giorgio Armani's design so successful, do you think? Like, what was it about his designs, especially, that promoted him into the stratosphere?
I think you'd get a different answer to that depending on who you ask because of how they sort of came to him in the brand. So from my perspective, it's very much that 1980s Italian soft tailoring, draped silhouette, everything slightly oversized, all of the buttons and the style lines are all slightly dropped and more relaxed. And I was writing about this earlier, and I was saying about how at the time when we were looking at these uptight, pinstriped, yuppie aesthetics, he came out with this hands in pockets, relaxed
Mm,
way of being smart. And I think from my perspective, that was standout. And then how much that infiltrated popular culture I think was phenomenal. Him doing the wardrobe for American Gigolo, of course, made it super mainstream and sexy and desirable to be smart but not uptight. So I think that influence was huge. I think you probably get a different answer if you ask someone who is perhaps younger millennial or younger still, and they might reference red carpet, women's wear, and all of those sorts of things. But what's true across all of them, and what I think made him stand out and makes him iconic, is that his menswear was about softening traditional male silhouettes, and his
right.
women's wear was about sharpening traditional women's silhouettes. So it was about blurring those gender traditions and perhaps opening up those different more opportunities for how we might want to appear, which is
Right.
quite surprising when you think about these quite linear silhouettes or almost uniform type garments. But actually, it was quite groundbreaking in its way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, American Gigolo, I've still yet to see American Gigolo, even though I love Richard Gere. It's just a film that never lands on TV. It hasn't been on any streaming platforms for free, like for the last 5 years that I can
Mm.
see anyway. And I'm just wondering now there'll be a huge uptick in people just wanting to download and buy that. Um, Shamefully, yeah. I mean, I've yet to see it, but I'm also kind of reticent to buy it because I just feel like it's one of them films that will just come on Amazon. The second I buy it, I'll be like, oh, there it is for free. Thanks for that.
I think
But
you're absolutely right. I think we'll start seeing it everywhere, but I'm in the same boat as you. I've seen lots of clips from it, but I've never sat and watched the full film.
yeah, no, I've got to sit down and pay attention, especially as he's my mum's favorite actor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah, Richard Gere,
I'm really
like
excited to
that's
see
it.
though if this does happen when we see this this suddenly this takeover, and
Mm.
perhaps some of the other films that Armani dressed for, if we start to see this takeover, what will the influence be on the new watchers, on the new viewers, and what
Mm.
will they take from it? And will we see that back
Yeah.
in the high street or more or higher? It could be really interesting.
So I mean, he also, I mean, he made clothes, I should say, for over about 200 films. I mean, 200 plus. And I mean, he didn't just do kind of the contemporary, relaxed, fluid lines clothing of the day that he became famous for. He also did like period clothes as well, like for the Untouchables. So he knew like the history of clothes and where clothes came from in terms of the thickness and the the tactile nature of clothes on film, which is also not something that every designer has. You know, they don't always have the eye for what can look good on film. They might have an eye on what can look good on people, but then
Mm.
that crossing that line and making himself like a cinematic success as well. Also, I thought he's up there with quite rare air, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a rare, or he was, I should say, a rare entity. He was a humble polymath, someone who perhaps didn't scream that he knew everything, but obviously knew a huge amount to be able to apply it in that huge range of spaces that we've talked about.
Yeah. So, well, when you think of his outfits, were there some real key moments for him in terms of what his most famous outfits were?
I think one that's always referenced is Annie Hall on Diane Keaton from 1978. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not a fan, but I think it is reflective of its time. And I think it was probably quite brave at its time. I think the one that really stands out to me and probably will to a lot of people is Grace Jones's cover for Nightclubbing, the album. And I think a
Mm,
lot of people can picture straight away that album cover with the statuesque Grace Jones in the middle, the cigarette in mouth, and then this super power suit, super shoulders. And it's such an iconic graphic image. And that's his vision, that's his dressing, his styling that's done that. So I think that one stands out to me.
yeah, no, that's interesting. Grace Jones, probably one of the only females of the time that didn't need shoulder pads. I mean, she was so well built. I mean, like the shoulders on that girl alone, and the traps and the biceps. I mean, anyway, just thinking, it's like if you really had to make someone look more androgynous and and power suited,
Yeah.
Grace Jones is just probably doesn't need that much padding. That's all.
No, I
Out
mean,
of all
she
we
was
got.
physically sculptural, wasn't she, at the
Yeah,
time? And
yeah,
then also the idea of adding these power shoulders to a suit was about metaphoric power, wasn't it, as well? And again, she wasn't lacking. She was
yeah.
so strong and so powerful at that moment. So yeah, I think it's a bit of it's an unusual choice, but maybe that's why it's got such a lasting impact, perhaps.
Interesting. Um, so how would you say that he changed the fashion industry going forward once he burst onto the scene? What were the ramifications of him and his like relaxed versions of his suits? How did that affect the industry?
I think it was huge, really. I think it's quite difficult to pinpoint because it's like the career spans such a long period, it's quite tricky to pinpoint the moment that he made a difference.
Mm.
But I think for me, there's two sort of elements that really do stand out. One is that in the 1990s, we saw brands like Versace and similar really embracing this fantasy escapism, bold sequins, harlequin patterns, and all of this sort of brave, fantastic character-based catwalk, and his was absolutely not that. So the anti-fashion approach, this idea of almost ungendered uniforms, countering this hyper-feminine catwalk that we would see, I think that really did spark a shift that really impacted the broader fashion industry. So that's really exciting.
Right.
And then the thing is the element that we said before about this sort of polymath, this idea that one brand, one man in this case, could encompass so many different market areas and different market levels as well.
Yeah.
And I think we see more of that now with these, I suppose, in a very different way. Virgil Abloh almost was tapping into that, this idea that one person could influence so many things. And actually now Pharrell Williams really is that person that I can think of at the moment who is embodying all those different areas. So I think that influence has been tremendous. And I think perhaps because of him being so humble, as we said before, I'm not even sure those people would identify that influence from him, but I think
No.
it's there.
Yeah, because I've seen a few interviews with him, like in the last week, obviously, because it's been all over my news feed. But I haven't seen him speak English in any interviews. Did he ever learn how to speak English?
And I'm not sure myself. It's interesting because I read an article not long ago, and he it was sorry, it was recorded not long ago. The interview with him, and it's in London, but it's all in Italian,
Yeah,
and
it does
he's
seem
talking about.
strange, doesn't it, for such a global brand and I mean, obviously, like do what you want. I can't speak Italian, so what am I to say? But it is kind of strange in this day and age that someone of that stature has just stuck to his own language and never bothered to be speaking English. But
I think it's unusual, but I also think good for him.
oh yeah, no, oh look, it's better. It sounds better for a start.
Yeah,
Anything that
sure.
comes out of his mouth, I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds right. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about. He's
Yeah.
Italian. He's well dressed. He's elegant. Yeah, um, interesting. Well, I mean, now since he's passed, what do you think is going to happen next for the brand? I mean, he was, like we were talking about, he was the Amiga for the brand. He was just here, there, and everywhere for it. Is it going to get passed down? Is there some next of kin? Do you have any insight to that?
There's no immediate familial heir, so that he had no children to pass to. So it's whether or not there's extended family that there's already an arrangement in place. I think this is very much an unknown, and I think because it's such an unusual case where it was one person rather than a huge board of people or multiple shareholders. I think this is a really unusual case that we're looking at, and I think this is something that will come out over. It might take months to see what emerges. I think it would be tragic if the house was split up, and I think that would be a real shame if different entities adopted different sections of the brands. Um, Hopefully, it's something that can be kept together and continued. But I mean, in some cases, we've seen where and Lagerfeld quite fancied this himself, didn't he? Where he died, the brands went with him, and that was it. And it lived as long as he lived. So
Right.
it'd be interesting to see if that sort of approach is taken. But who knows?
I can't imagine. So, did Lagerfeld actually want that? Sounds like one of the most narcissistic things to do. Like, right, if I die, the brand dies, and I'm
I
going to
mean,
put 2,000 people out of work. That's
you
good.
see that,
That's
but narcissist, yeah, but classic Lagerfeld also, yeah. So
yeah.
I think it could go either way.
Yeah, it's not uncharacteristic, is it? I guess. But there must have been I'm just thinking there must have been like a procession plan for. I mean, he was in his 90s. It wasn't like like Versace got shot on the doorstep. I mean, that was, no one's going to have an idea what to do when Versace dies right then. But someone in their 90s, I imagine there must have been some kind of plan handover in the wings.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if there wasn't. So I think it's just a case of seeing what emerges, but there must have been something worked on and
Yeah.
established. It might be that we just see this roll over in this announcement and business as usual, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see something quite dramatic, but really rich and loyal in the funeral and in in those celebrations, and that might lead on to announcements after that.
Right. Yeah. No, interesting. God, that funeral's going to be star-studded, isn't it?
I
Or
would
just
think so.
imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I might figure out where that is. Go to see if I can get some autographs, get some DVDs signed. Anyway, sorry.
I think it'll be quite a sight. I think that's
Yeah,
certainly something. Yeah.
no, definitely. I mean, like, so just to finish off, I guess, what do you think his legacy will be in the fashion industry? Like, how will he be looked back on in, say, 5 years, 10 years, maybe 20 years? What do you think people will think of Armani and perceive him as?
Well, what I would hope is that what we said at the beginning of the chat isn't something that will prevail, that people don't really know him because they only know the products and the brand.
Mm,
I think he had an awful lot to give, and I think he was very generous from what I can gather. And actually, he's someone that I didn't know a huge amount about until digging this week and really realizing how much charitable work he'd done and how much he'd tried to support communities and people struggling with different medical conditions, but also, I mean, he was a real advocate for AIDS charities, obviously after losing his partner, but also supporting refugees during the Afghanistan crisis. So he did a huge amount. And I would like to think those sorts of things will be the things he's remembered for. I also think his love of his muses re-wearing garments, like Kate Blanchett re-wearing the custom privé gown. I think the fact that he wanted people to re-wear things means we won't see the last of these garments for a long, long time. I think we'll see a resurgence of vintage Armani. And I don't know, fingers crossed, we might see a Met Gala theme and maybe a real celebration in that sense of his work.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Well, we'll have to keep our eyes open, but I'm sure we'll hear about it. Listen, Rebecca, thank you so much for taking time out today and
Oh, my
jumping
pleasure.
on. Yeah, it was lovely talking to you, and hopefully we'll meet up soon. And until next time. Oh, where can people find you, by the way?
You can find us on Instagram, CU_fashion_UK. That's our course's Instagram page. And I can barely leave it alone, so I'm on there a lot.
All right,
But
great.
also, I'm very much glued to Coventry University, so any of their socials you'll be able to find me through.
Wonderful. And we'll leave links in the show notes so people can get hold of you if they've got questions or want to pick your brain. Brilliant.
Amazing.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Sam.
Rebecca. See you soon. You've been listening to the Menswear Style podcast. Be sure to head over to menswearstyle.co.uk for more menswear content and email info@menswearstyle.co.uk if you would like to be a future guest on the show. Finally, please help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Until next time.